It's time to quilt! Hi, this is the second half of our tree landscape skill building project. In the first video, I got the quilt top applique sandwiched and ready to quilt and finish. Today we will quilt it, highlight some details with fabric paint, and then finish it off with some decorative free motion stitching. After the first video, I prepared the quilt by basting around the outer edge on my Bernina Q20. Basting is pretty straightforward. But just for reference, I set my stitch regulator for mode 3, the basting stitch mode, with 1/2 inch stitch length. If you're stitching at a domestic machine, either use the longest straight stitch you can set, or use your basting stitch if your machine has one. Before we quilt, you need to choose your threads. I used 40 weight superior polyester threads in matching colors for the sky and tree parts, and chose a 12 weight Wonderfill rayon for the vine quilting on the green hill. There are a couple of others I used for decorative stitching too, and we'll talk about those later. Let's set up our machines for free motion quilting. I'm going to do all of my quilting today at my Bernina Q20 sit-down machine, but you can do this on a domestic machine too. There's a link below to a blog I wrote on setting your machines up, regardless of which type you're using. The first part of the quilting is what you might call stitching in the ditch for all the seam lines. For the flowers on the treetop, though, I'm stitching just inside the edge of the appliques rather than actually in the ditch. This stitches them down permanently and adds to the quilting at the same time. I am using 12 stitches per inch here and my laser pointer on my Q20 that lights exactly where the needle will stitch when I am doing this kind of stitching. I'm using a 40 weight variegated green polyester thread with a 9014 top stitch titanium needle. After that, I took a look at the blobs that compose the top and stitched around many of the flowers inside the applique to add to the flowery nature of the top. Sometimes it gets hard to see, so I recommend you look across the blobs and also feel across them to find where it needs more quilting. You want the quilting to spread fairly evenly across the treetop, but still allow for a little loft in the flowers. Don't forget that you will also need to stitch around the tree trunk and along the seam between the sky and the green hill with a lightweight matching thread or monopoly. This helps stabilize the quilt to prevent any pleating or distortion as you work. You will want to lower your top tension there and use a 70-10 needle. To quilt the sky, I decided to quilt a combination of small, fluffy clouds here and there combined with a horizontally elongated basic stipple for the sky. The clouds will puff up, and we will go back later and color them a little whiter to enhance them. The horizontally elongated basic stipple suggests a gentle breeze in the sky and is easy to do. For all of the sky quilting, I'm using a matching 40 weight polyester thread and a 9014 top stitch needle. Now it's time to quilt the green hill. I gave a lot of thought to deciding how I wanted to quilt it. Grass is difficult to represent across a whole green hill. Too much of it as a fill for a large area can look messy. Instead, I decided to try using some Wonderfil 12-weight dark green rayon thread I recently obtained to quilt a vine and leaf meander to cover the hill. I enjoy doing this particular fill stitch. If you have my workbook linked below, it has a few suggested fills you might try for your own hill, including this one. To use this thread, I am using a 116 titanium top stitch needle, and I lowered the thread tension a bit. I set my stitch regulator to mode 1 and to 10 stitches per inch, and I lowered the cruising speed, also known as the idling speed, to 200 on my Q20. I also threaded the machine so the thread crosses the thread lubricator, and I used some of the pink liquid that comes with the machine in the lubricator sponge. It is similar to the thread lubricants you can buy in most quilt shops or online. For a domestic machine, just lower the speed and top tension a bit. Run lubricant along the thread from top to bottom on the spool and rub it into the thread, or use your thread lubricator if your machine has one. Rayon is delicate and can break easily if you don't take care, but I did not have this thread break during the entire quilting of the hill in my sit-down long arm. I was totally happy with the results, and you can see that the hill is beautifully vine covered. To add some highlights and make the clouds look more like clouds, I pulled out my artist's crayons and a small stiff brush. I decided the sunlight was coming from the upper left corner, so with several colors of browns, I colored the tree trunk a bit so it took on a more rounded appearance, and darkened the right side of the tree and lightened the left side. I also highlighted the limbs and roots a bit, imagining the sunlight as I did so. There's a link below to the artist's crayons I used. Then I wet the brush with water, though not too much, and painted across the crayoned area. These artist crayons will then blend like watercolors. After they dry a little, heat set the crayons with the iron. Don't press too hard. You don't want to lose the puffy texture, but the batting will usually repuff after a while if you happen to do so. With the white crayon, I colored in the clouds and blended the coloring with a brush. Then heat set those too. I did this several times because it required several coats of crayons to turn the clouds white enough. I took a good look at the quilt to decide what it needed in the way of additional thread work. I decided to put a vine climbing up the tree trunk. I first used the same thread I used on the hill and stitched the vine with a few leaves running up the tree. This required 3 passes of stitching along the vine to make it heavy enough. Then I decided the vine still needed something else to help it stand out. So using the same needle and settings, I added a Wonderfil 12-weight thread with a little metallic sparkle and stitched another 3 passes of stitches along the vine. It gave a wonderful result, looking almost as if there had just been a little rain and the vine was still wet. I finished up by using a 12-weight cotton thread with a 116 top stitch needle to put just a few clumps of long grass here and there on the hill for a more natural look. Off camera, I squared up and bound my quilt. It ended up almost exactly 22 inches by 18 inches. I hope you enjoyed this project. Once you make this one, I'm sure you'll see how easily you can use these techniques for trees of multiple sizes. For example, you might want to create a special tree pattern for a bonsai-themed quilt. Or you might want to make a larger landscape quilt with a lot of different trees. In some future videos, I'll demonstrate landscape quilting projects for other types of trees, like evergreens. That will help you fill out your forest. Please don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. On my website, there's also a completely illustrated workbook to accompany this 2-video project with a pattern and other information like step-by-step instructions, quilting designs, and a materials list. It is only $5 and will help support future free videos for us to share. And as always, if you have any questions, please post them below and I'll try and answer them. See you next time and have fun in your studio. Hopefully the cicadas won't get so loud.